Okay, Vanessa, George, thanks so much for joining me on the Football Focus Surf Chat. Excited to talk.
Yeah, excited to chat with you guys.
You're set up a D license, and once I heard about this, I reached out and wanted to start the conversation around how do you go about this, and what were the stages around making this happen? What needed to be in place from a club standpoint, from an applicant standpoint, and how can we replicate and do more of these?
The first step is having candidates that want to do the course, right? You have to have enough candidates to do the course. So you get interest from your coaches. They obviously, in order to do a D license, you have to have done your grassroots in-person courses. You have to do 2 of them. One must be the 11v11 course. So you go through that. Normally, what we end up doing is doing about 2 of those and then running a D afterwards. So with a lot of the same coaches. But you have to have coaches that want to move on to their D license. That's the pretty obvious first step. Logistically, the first step is finding a field that you can host as well as a classroom that you can use for a weekend. So Vanessa did a great job of finding us a classroom setting. You can do a presentation, meet with the candidates there, and then a field for our on-field portion. Then from there, we just set it up. So this one we actually set up with US Club. So you can set them up with US Club, US Youth Soccer, or just US Soccer in general. So we set this one up with US Club. Essentially, we reach out to them, fill out the form. Hey, we have our setting, we have where we're going, and then we get approved to put it on. So Vanessa reached out to me as I'm an instructor, and that's how we got it set up. You can obviously ask US Club for an instructor. You can ask USYS for an instructor, or if in Vanessa's case, like within the Surf Nation, she knew that I was an instructor, reached out to me. It's only 7 hours from Bozeman. So here we are making something happen.
Vanessa, part one of George's answer was you got to have the candidates, you got to have the interest in it. And obviously for that there needs to be certain requirements around the grassroots. Two grassroots courses, I think you said, George, and one of them had to be 11v11. So how did you, Vanessa, then manage to get a sense of that, I suppose, that prerequisite, knowing that you had enough coaches who had done that, or did you facilitate that as well?
So for us, we have actually, and me personally, have been trying to get a course in Montana for almost 2 years now. We're in between like our MYSA, which is our local association, getting a new director. And so we haven't had any opportunity to advance our education. And so we do have like the grassroots. So we did do that in, I want to say, March. So we did the grassroots to make sure that everyone that wanted to have their D license, that they would be prepared for that. And so I have a ton of coaches that have been wanting more education. It just hasn't been offered in Montana. And then that's when I reached out, and George was like, yeah, I'm an instructor. And I'm like, this is brilliant. Can we do it? And he had done it through our JPL league. Because I had tried doing it through our local association. It never worked out. And this way we have our own facility for a classroom. We have a field right down the way. And then it keeps it local for our coaches, that they don't have to go travel or anything like that. We did actually have a coach that was really gung-ho and wanted to get his education. He went to California, I want to say 3 weekends in a row, not in a row, but like throughout the course, to get his education. So I think keeping it local, connecting with other surf clubs is huge, because they're now listening to other coaches and other instructors than just Montana-based instructors. And I think that is huge for the small clubs, the small towns, and the small states that don't have like that soccer, that intense soccer like California and other places do. So I think that's going to be a huge part, and the coaches are really looking forward to it.
George, talk me through the kind of US soccer landscape in terms of instructors, because there's now more of a drive to get people like yourself around the country to do that. In essence, talk about what you're capable of doing, to go around these clubs and do that there.
Yeah, so they have updated it since I did mine, I'll say that. So I don't fully understand how it works right now. I am working on getting to where I can do the C license, and you have to go through an initial instructor course and then a specific one for the license that you want to work on, right? So there's a base course, a base instructor course, and then there's a technical lead for U.S. soccer for each of these levels. And essentially you then go to them and have to work through that level. Currently, what I did is it's called the grassroots instructor license. That it has morphed now, but I can do grassroots, all the 77, 11v11, 99, as well as the B license is what I am currently approved for. And I did that course, and it's been about 4 years now since I did that course. And it was 2 trips to Kansas City and a lot of recording yourself doing meetings with candidates. It was, now they call them student coaches, but yes, it was good. So that's some of the changes and how they're updating everything. They're really getting more dialed in on you instruct this course so that you really start dialing in on what the course is.
Brilliant. The challenge I see from logistics, Vanessa, is that coaches being coaches who don't have the grassroots part will say, well, it's not available, I'll wait until then. What if you book it first, you can't necessarily book it and they will come. How did you manage to get ahead of the game in terms of convincing people to do the grassroots part that they needed to do?
For us, it's a requirement. It's the base requirement for our coaches. One, they just get maybe, they just get that standard of like what everyone else has gone through. Yeah, maybe we don't do the play, practice, play model within our club, but just having that other option of how to run a training session. And again, learning from other coaches. Our grassroots was ran by a instructor from Missoula Strikers, and he was great. The coaches loved him, and also just gave them a different approach of how to approach players and coaches. So I think for us, it's a baseline. And then for the D course, like I said, our coaches are super motivated, and I think the more education that they can have, the better. And it also goes on to the resume. Some of them want to go potentially, coach in college. Some want to just continue coaching here. But I think having the education behind your name just helps you. I mean, and I again, I may not do the play, practice, play model, but I still learned a lot from the D course and that I could apply. And, I learned from other coaches on how they did certain drills. So it's also about that collaboration with other people around the state that you learn from it. So for us, grassroots is the baseline, and we don't really necessarily get any pushback. We just say, hey, this is what we're offering. It's here. We always make it like really convenient, right? We always make it here locally. So it's just one Saturday for the grassroots. You come in, you get your education done, and then, we keep it moving. So yeah, for us, it's a baseline.
Brilliant. Love that. George, what does it look like? What does the D look like in terms of time and work?
So a grassroots course, like Vanessa just said, it's one day generally, and you'll do 2 courses. So it's like an 8-hour, 9-hour day with a 1-hour lunch in the middle. So you do your classroom part. There's actually a few ways that you can set it up, but in general, you would do your classroom and then your field. So it'd be, your 2 hours in the classroom, 2 hours on the field, a lunch break, and then you could go into your 11v11 course second. So you could do 7v7 and 11v11 back to back, 9v9 and 11v11 back to back, and then you get your entire thing out in one day. We're going to be hosting one here in Boise that is actually going to be a Friday night and a Saturday morning just because of the heat, right? So you have a few options. So in July, trying to do a session in the afternoon gets to be very hot, and so we're going to do the classroom portions on Friday and the field portions on Saturday morning, just to knock it out. So you do have that flexibility. The other thing that we haven't touched on yet that you need for these courses is players. So players come out and they actually are the people that are in the course, right? So while we have candidates running sessions, in the olden days, right, when we started doing our coach education, it was basically grown up soccer camp. They've done a really good job of updating that, and now we bring out players and the candidates, and the coaches are actually working with the players that they're gonna be working with. So age appropriate, athletes that they get to work with on the field. So looking out for them as well with the heat and the ability to vary when, right? So if there's a group, you can switch it and do the field portion first as well. If you just can't get players later on, there is flexibility in scheduling. The D license is the one that we have set up. There's a couple different ways you can do it. Ours is a 2 weekends with weekly Zoom meetings in between. So we'll be meeting on, I think it's on Wednesday evenings, and we'll be doing weekly calls there. And then they do 2 in-person sessions over a weekend. Those are full days, Saturday and Sunday, about 8 hours each day. So it's pretty extensive. There's a lot to cover. Vanessa's going to be stoked that they updated the D license. I say they, like US Soccer updated it to not just be play, practice, play either. So there's new stuff there.
Yeah. Glad you referenced the golden days, George. I remember the golden days. But there's also part of coaches that are, this is not a knock or a criticism, it's just life, that haven't upgraded since the golden days. And that type of brings a feeling about coach education that has a stigma to it almost, where like, it's irrelevant, or I need to update this. I've coached more games than whatever. Talk about the kind of evolution of coach education through your eyes. And I want your thoughts on this too, Vanessa. The kind of evolution of coach education over the last, a lot of research, a lot of investment has gone into US club or US soccer education. What's your experience been in terms of that change?
Yeah, I went through the licensing like during the changes, right? So I did the old D license and then kind of like transitioned during the C license and then the B and the A, right? Like kind of went through that change with US soccer. I'll touch on a couple of things. One, they have put a lot of emphasis on coach education, and that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where there are individuals that their entire job is to oversee one section of coach education. So like the D license has a lead, the C license has a technical lead within US soccer, and then there's the coach education department. The facility in Kansas City was built as a coach education facility for US soccer. So they like that kind of stuff really is the evolution of it. The courses, I think, the evolution of online, what we're doing right now, has also changed it. You can get a lot more in. So there's a lot more practicality to it in that we do an in-person course, and then it's like, okay, go implement, film some sessions, do some things within that, and then we come back and we meet again and we talk about it and we advance again. And then you go back again and you have to have these meetings, and it really opens up the ability to do more with the online, and with the ability to do both. I will say, people that question coach education, at the very least, coach education shows that somebody's willing to learn and willing to grow and is willing to put in the time. So as long as people come into a coaching education course with that mentality of I'm gonna get better, then it doesn't matter what course you're taking. If it's a US soccer one, a United Soccer Coaches, there's some other, my mentor stuff with Surf, like all of that stuff is really good to just get involved in educating yourself and getting better at something. So that's how coaching education has evolved over even just the last 10 years, honestly. That's really where a lot of it has changed.
Vanessa, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think back in the day, the coaching education was a little bit of an easier route, is what I've heard from other coaches that have been coaching for a long time. But I'm with George. Like, I think the more a coach wants to go get more education, that means they care and that they want to better themselves and also better the players around them. And so for me, that's huge. You may not agree with the coaching style but you're going to learn and you're going to get something from that course. And I think and same with like the Surf Nation education. I send it out to my coaches. You may not listen to all of it, but you may get some pieces from everything and then put it in and make your own adjustments and apply it to your training session. So I think as just an individual, the more that you're pushing yourself to get better, whether it's in soccer or anything outside of soccer, then it means that you care and that you want to be you want to be better for yourself and then the people around you. So the education I see has grown, and it's definitely come more in depth. I've have coaches that have A license and they didn't have to do what the D license has to do. So it's definitely come more in depth, but I think the more that we just have it as a forefront and more of an educational piece for our coaches, not more of a mandatory, but educational and helping them become better coaches. I think that's how we get the buy-in from the coaches. And like I said, my coaches want the education. They want to become better. They want to learn. The only thing I would say is when I did the D course and they asked like, what is your goal for this course? I wanted to learn more about the X's and O's. Maybe that's in the following courses. But that's one of the things for me is I'd love to just learn more about the X's and O's. I've been coaching for a while, but you never know. Like there's some things that you would learn. So that's one thing that I would love to see more of from the education is just more of the X's and O's. But yeah, I think it's huge.
Brilliant, George. Let's ask you about that then. If A and Pro is basically a thesis on periodization, from what I've seen in conversations with people doing it, it's just like it's a sports science degree at some stage. How does the D then build up to what Vanessa's saying then? What is it, technical or is there is there an easy answer on that? I don't know.
Yeah. I would say that yes, you're right. I mean, like the A license is a very, very intensive doctorate degree, essentially that you go through in the current landscape. I think it's at about a 10-month time frame. They all of course build on each other. What I don't instruct the CB and A. I've taken them, but working through the D license, it's more about the methodology in which you're teaching is what changes and adapts. So there's different methodologies that is also morphing. That's why I'm kind of choosing my words wisely. So it used to be very clear, like grassroots and D were play, practice, play, right? The C license started to morph into maybe a little bit of observation, learning, implementation, and then we got to the B and the A, and you could start to do even old school, small to large games. Now it's less about that methodology and more about how you implement that methodology. So I think that given the tools that somebody would need at each level, you're just looking at it a little bit different in terms of the level of the teams, the level of the coach, also the age groups. So grassroots to B, right? You're really specific on these are the age groups that we're focusing on. Ages and stages get really important. That's a few of the things, but yeah, as you get into the higher courses, we touch on periodization and coaching games, and the tasks of a coach, of course, in the licensing. But when you get higher, that becomes a much larger thing. The periodization tables and all the things that you touched on a bit. So that's how it works.
Let's talk about like implementing or almost like the short term prep for it now. I mean, what's the response been like, Vanessa, with your coaches, and how many are going?
Well, we haven't. I think I have 12 for sure wanting to do it. I don't know if they've registered yet, but I've gotten a consensus of 12. And like I said, it's been, years of coaches wanting to get more. Like I only have my D. I've wanted to get my C and keep growing. We haven't had those opportunities here in Montana. And actually MYSA, which is our local league, they did set one up during season, but I can't have my coaches take 2 weekends off in the middle of the season because who's going to coach their team? So that's kind of where George and I came up with the whole summer part. It's like weekly Zooms and then two weekends in the summer. And it just seems to be a little bit better fit for our coaches. And then hoping, we progress from there. And But yeah, we've got 12 coaches. That's just in my section of the competitive 11v11. And we may have maybe like 5 additional in the academy, the lower level, or, 7v7 99. So we have a good group. I also put it out to coaches around the state, just in case they have coaches that want to do it as well. So I work with Billings coaches or directors, Helena directors, and then Missoula. So they also got the information. But yeah, so we got a good amount.
George, random question. What's the biggest challenge of coaching a coach rather than coaching a player?
It's really not a different challenge. It's the same challenge. It's egos. That is the largest challenge for sure. Like people that don't want to be there or think they're above it. I tell people all the time, like when I'm instructing a D or even a grassroots course, like I learn something every single time. That's why I do it. I love it. But there are those people that want to challenge you and want to prove a point rather than learn something, and that it's a challenge, but it's also just kind of a little bit disappointing because you're like, man, like let's just learn something here. But I would say that's the biggest challenge in general. I absolutely love it. I mean, working with coaches, the amount of kids that you can impact working with a group of coaches is obviously 10 to 12 times the amount that you can impact working on the field. So that's why I do it. It's a challenge, but at the end of the day, the challenges definitely are not very big. They're not great.
Can coaches fail their D, or is that they can?
Yeah, you basically have to not show up or not do the work at that level. But yeah, I mean, definitely there. You could not show up and not do the work. We're gonna especially at the D level, we're gonna help them through it. So we're definitely gonna have to have, there are assignments and we have to work through it together. But that's what we're here for, and the goal is not for them to come out of there the best coach ever. It's for them to come out of there with the D license competencies, and in general, we can get them to those as long as they're willing to work. It's really only the people that are not willing to work on it and aren't willing to do the work that would fail a D license.
Vanessa, you said something at the start about some of the positives about putting it on your resume, and obviously there's a professional networking potential there as well. Is that something that you see in the Montana area, that it's a little bit of, like it used to be, again, before the world got digital, you used to be able to sit around with coaches and chat, is this an opportunity to almost do that as well and kind of build more of a natural network than requesting everyone on LinkedIn today?
I just think having it on your resume just gives you a little bit of credibility. Like my coaches are super young, but they're educated. I think for me, I pick people that are relatable to the players, because if they're relatable to the players and know the game, then the other things we can teach them, right? Like, the X's and O's and running a drill and running a session and all those things. But if you don't have that connection between the player and the coach, then you're going to have a rough season. So for me, my coaches are super young. And so I just want them to have that credibility, just to say like, hey, I do have my D license and I'm working to my C and I want to get higher. I think in Montana, it's still like that old school, who is, if you're a high school coach, you're a high level coach, those kind of things. So for me, it's just setting up my coaches for success, giving them a little bit of credibility. A lot of them do want to coach in high school, so that also helps them. So just for me, it's their success and credibility.
I love that. Like I was just thinking there, the first thing when I finished playing and I was a GA, the first thing my head coach did was maybe take a coaching course, which and back then I didn't know what it was and wasn't that excited to have to say about taking one, and it was the best thing I could ever have done. Because when you're young, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you think that you definitely don't see the game from a coach's lens, and I would even argue that you probably don't even know how much work your coach puts into getting there and doing all that. So it's a lovely little progression of awareness to see what the profession is about. It's not about standing in a suit at the new camp, clapping your hands. It's more about getting stuck in traffic, Vanessa, or having something that doesn't work, or losing your cones. That's coaching.
Yep.
On that note, Gary, we're starting to implement some coaching education with our high school age players in the area. So yeah, just like exactly on that note that you just touched on is getting those sophomore, juniors in high school, more like juniors and seniors, but getting them involved in coaching education so that when they're done playing or as they go off to college, like they do have that initial course. So that is an option for people. Like you don't have to be, a coach per se to get in and do the courses. So
I love that.
Mm.
Hey, George, for coaching education, this is kind of a question. Do you guys as a club cover the costs? Like how I think like some clubs do it differently, and I just kind of want to see what I personally think we should, because they're getting better for our players. And also, like I said, a lot of them are young, and an extra $400 is, well, that's a lot of money if you're in college and, just freshly out of college. So I just kind of, what's your guys' approach on covering costs for your coaches?
yeah, we do cover the cost of the coaching education. I could go into detail on it if you want me to, but it's there's a payment schedule, a repayment schedule, right? So if they leave the club after 1 year, they have to pay us back 50%. If they leave the club after 2 and 3 years, right, it's different amounts. So that way because we're doing it for the players, not for that coach. And so if they leave the club, then they're not impacting our players. So that is how we implement ours. When you get to the higher licenses, like we have somebody that would like to do their A license. That's like he has to get approval for that because we have to make sure that it's a budgetable thing for that year. But yes, we do reimburse coaches for doing the course. It's as soon as they pass the course, so they do have to front the money. If it's a big thing and they can't front the money, then yeah, of course we're going to help them because coaching education is a really big, important part of what we do.
Awesome, thank you. That's about kind of like what we do too. Just having that commitment. We're investing in you, which is investing into the children, and like for us, we don't really have that issue about people jumping. We're pretty core group in the competitive section. So, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on how you kind of approach that. Because, I mean, you start at the D, and I'm sure we're going to have coaches wanting to get the C, which is more money, and then the B, so I like that approach too.
Roadblock. The money's a roadblock, so it is a thing, but yeah, we still want to promote people doing it and get people through it. So,
all right, last one for you, and it's the same question each. There's a surf coach listening to this and isn't within range of driving or getting coaches in the other end of the country or whatever, like us here, but is thinking, yeah, I need to do this. Maybe there's a surf club within range that we could work with, or so that's a possibility. What would you say would be maybe step 1, 2, maybe even 3, whatever, first couple of steps definitely to kick this process off and try to get a bit of momentum?
So if you're just a coach wanting to get a license, like the first step is going to the Learning Center, the U.S. Soccer Learning Center, and creating your profile and doing the online course. That gets you to where you can look up the courses in your area and find one in your area, a grassroots course that you can register for. Once you've done that, right, then you just do those 2 grassroots and then you can move on. If you're a director looking, hey, I have a group of coaches that would like to bring a course to my area, kind of the same process. You can go into the Learning Center. I know how US Club does theirs. It's a form that you can fill out online through US Club. And then you can just submit that you would like to host a course. And then you can say you have an instructor or you don't have an instructor. And then they would then utilize their network of coach educators to come out and help the club. But that's the general process. So yeah, if you want to use your state association, you can reach out to your state technical director, and in general, they are a coach educator, and they'll be able to help you as well, or tell you when they're planning to host their next one.
Brilliant. Vanessa?
Yeah, so I think, and I'm just going to add on, like, with having a Surf Nation kind of community, I think we could even do more on, like for me, I have been trying and I just reached out to George and it just kind of went from there. And so just kind of having maybe like a spreadsheet saying like, these are the instructors within our Surf Nation and where they're located. Because, you know, like I said, it took me a couple years. I didn't even think about George until I can't even remember what happened. And I just reached out just on a whim and he's like, oh, I'm an instructor. So maybe having a database for the directors to be able to host these classes. And going through US Club, she was amazing. She wanted to keep the cost down. She worked with me because it was my first time ever doing it. She was awesome. So setting it up and the support that they give you through US Club was awesome. So I think for you, for Surf Nation, having, you know, those instructors and having, you know, instructors that do D, C, you know, and all the way up. And then also, can we come together as Surf Nation and offer, you know, a C course? You know, we don't have a ton of coaches in Montana that want to get a C or a B or an A. So is there a way we could come together and say Surf Nation is hosting one in California and all the directors or the coaches that are ready for it would fly out and do that course within a Surf Nation kind of community? Because I think when I go to Surf Summit, I learn so much from the coaches, the directors, just on how they run their club and what they do. So I think the more we can get those kind of community settings, the more we can learn from each other. So that would be my push to get more education, and the fact that our coaches want it is awesome, because you're not fighting it.
Like also a great resource for surf to have, you know, instructors like George in the network and working, and then, you know, people who are passionate about it and driving it like you, Vanessa. Like that's not common either. So like kudos to both of you for doing what you're doing. And I know this is going to inspire a lot of thinking and hopefully a lot of action. So thank you so much for what you're doing. If we can help in any way, let us know. But appreciate you jumping on. Fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much,
Thank
Jerry.
you.
Appreciate it.